Evan. Today I'm gonna be editing a scene from my STV show, or STV show I worked on, Cardinal Vice, last year. We're just kind of gonna go through, and I'm gonna show my process, kind of from start to finish, on how I organize my footage, bring it into a project, file name, saving, all of that stuff. Some basic editing. I've kind of detailed all of this here, as well as some intermediate stuff that might be a little bit trickier, and then we'll go into exporting. And this entire time, if I go too fast, or if anyone wants any clarification, or if I skip over something or I don't mention a keyboard shortcut, just shout out. Let me see if I can open the chat. Okay, I can see that. But I'm probably going to close off most of the Zoom stuff so I can kind of see the editing window. So yeah, Ava, if you see anything in the chat, just shout out, cut me off, and let me know. But yeah, so starting with Premiere, kind of, when you open it up, you guys may be working on different versions of Premiere. They put a new one out, it seems, almost every month. And they've been going through some pretty big design changes lately. But regardless, you'll have a similar kind of UI to this. And so if you're starting with a completely new project, you'll start with new project. But before we kind of cover that, I want to talk about kind of organizing your files. So for me, I edit everything off of an external SD, and I highly recommend you do as well. It kind of saves your internal storage. But I have a pretty strict file organization, and that's just to kind of keep me sane across multiple projects, making sure all my footage and audio is in the same place. And I just recommend finding one that works for you and then just sticking with it and kind of applying to everything. For me, I start with the date so that everything is kind of in an order, and I can see where my most recent projects are near the bottom, along with the name of kind of what I'm working on. And then I'll jump into this. And so I'm treating this as a video project. So I've got kind of my folders for audio, which will be the audio from the Cardinal Vice scene. I've got the photo, which will be our STV logo, which we'll want to use. I've got my project files, and I'll show you how to save your Premiere projects to an external drive, because if you don't do this, Premiere will automatically save to your computer, and it fills up your storage space really fast. I have renders, which I use when I'm exporting my video, so that I can easily find my drafts and my final versions. And then I have my video folder. And doing this, I didn't do this for the longest time, and it just gets so complicated. You start losing footage if you have something in your downloads folder and then you move it to a different folder, and Premiere has no idea where it's gone. Just having a strict file format organization and getting prepared before you even start editing the project, so as soon as the footage comes off your camera, is really just one of the best ways to not get sidetracked before you go into it. So I really recommend doing this if you're not, and figuring out a way that works for you. But yeah, so when we open Premiere, we can create a new project, and you'll have your name up here, and you'll have your location. So for this is how you would save it to an external drive. Is you browse the location, you would find your drive. Let me go into columns, and then you would save it in a project files format, and that way all your auto saves, everything is in the same place. If you need to share your project file with anyone, it's super simple. Some of these settings, usually I just leave them alone. I would too, unless you know for a fact that you're going to want to use a different renderer to working with your computer, your graphics card. But in general, Premiere mostly knows what it's doing, and it'll give you kind of the best settings here. Same with Scratch Disk and Ninja settings. But yeah, so once we create a project, let me open up. I actually already created one. And this will be, all right, so once you open Premiere, let's close this and go in here. So when you first open Premiere, it will look something like this. Actually, it will look more like this. And you basically have a bunch of these panels, and each one that has a different function. I am using a 13-inch MacBook, which is a super tiny screen, and I have very little screen real estate. So I have moved these panels around, which you can do by grabbing and pulling them from side to side. into one that kind of fits my screen and allows me to use as much of the screen real estate as I can, using these kind of primary panels. And so the ones that I use the most are going to be, sorry, let me figure out the ones that I use the most, and they're the most important, I think, are the timeline, which is where you're going to pretty much edit all of your footage. You have your tools, you have your program, which is kind of the video as you're editing. This is kind of what, this is your playback. This shows you what's going on. You have your source. So when you're finding clips through your project file or through your source list, this lets you kind of preview your clips, mark in and out points, choose what part of your footage you want to use, and then you can drag that into your timeline. And then here we have our project. And a couple other panels that are important are going to be effects. This is where you'll apply everything from stabilizers to color, and then effect controls. And this is where you can control all the aspects of your clips. And then down here, I have my audio. I pretty much only use, Premiere also has these up here, which are kind of preset workspaces. They kind of have different functions. This one's for kind of color grading and corrections. This one's for putting in effects. You have your audio workspace. With my workflow, I pretty much kind of just stick to editing and color. These are the only two that I use. Some people prefer using kind of these more specialized things, but honestly, I have been able to do everything I've needed to do in just these two. But so starting with a new project, if you just opened it up, the first thing you want to do is import your media. So you can double click here in this panel, or you can go through File, Import, it'll open up this. And so I would go to my project. And so I know I'm going to want my audio, I'm going to want the photo, I'm going to want the video. So I'm going to select these files. I'm just going to go ahead and import all of them in. And it will drag and kind of just throw them into Premiere in what are called bins. And this is kind of internal project organization. So this is demo files. This is what I use to kind of craft this tutorial. So you can ignore that one for now. But your audio will open in a bin, and it will open. All right, for some reason, Premiere did not import anything I asked it to. That just did not work for some reason. Let me try again. Yeah, all right, so another thing you will learn very quickly with Premiere is it will randomly do things that make absolutely no sense, and I have no idea why. I'm gonna try importing them one at a time, because maybe that will work. Let's try this. Nope, all right. We're gonna do it ourselves then. So we'll make a bin for audio, we will make a bin for video, and we will make a bin for our photo. And we will drag and drop ourselves. There we go. Okay, now it's working. Another good thing about Premiere is when things go wrong like this, there's almost always multiple ways to get through something. There's no really like one way to do any function. You can go through menus, you can go through keyboard shortcuts, you can drag and drop like I'm doing, and which can be confusing, but it's ultimately really nice when for some reason something doesn't work. You can almost always find another workaround that will. All right, so now I've imported all of my kind of assets for this project. I've got my video, I've got my audio, and I've got my photo. And so for this, for your timeline, there's kind of two ways you can go about doing it. So if you recorded your footage and you're happy with how you recorded it, if it's 30 frames per second, 24, if you're happy with that, you can drag your footage straight to the timeline and it will create a sequence that is identical to the footage. So it will match your footage in frame rate, in size. So that is one way to create a sequence. And then it will create a sequence in Premiere, which it is dropped into our video folder, but I'm going to pull out. If you know what you want, you can also go to File, New, Sequence, and this lets you kind of customize it. So you can go into Settings, you can go to a custom setup. You can say, I want it to be 24 frames a second, 1920 by 1080, general 1080p size. Kind of leave the other things, and then you can name your sequence down here. And there you'll have your sequence. And so this sequence is in 24 frames per second. So if I drag and drop my video footage, which is in 30 frames per second, it will say that it doesn't match. Premiere is really smart and able to work with footage. So if I put something in here that is in 30 frames per second, it'll still work and play normally. But for this case, we will go ahead and build off of our sequence where we just kind of drag and drop the footage because it'll match and it'll work the best. But so I'm gonna go ahead and import both of my video clips. I've got 2B and 2C, so these are kind of two sides of a conversation between these two characters. And so for both of these, we recorded external audio, which is up here. And I highly recommend recording external audio. Recording through a camera can lead to all sorts of problems. And what can seem kind of scary, having to synchronize and post, Premiere actually makes it really easy. So if we drag in our audio clips here, right now we kind of have them stacked. And so generally, the first thing I'll do once I find my clips and I choose them is I will go ahead and sync my footage. Actually, let me jump back just a little bit. When importing your footage, so I just dragged my video clips straight from my project panel into my timeline. You can also double click. You can double click and it'll bring them into this source monitor. And from here, you can kind of look over your clip. You can decide where you want to kind of start and stop. And using the keyboard commands I and O, kind of mark it in and out, as you can see down here on the project panel. So you can kind of mark a clip in, you can drag to where you want, and you can mark it out. You can say, okay, perfect, this is what, we cut it at the action and the cut points, we've got the clip that we want. You can drag the whole thing from the monitor and it'll bring the whole clip in. Or you can say, I just want the video and click this little button right here and you will get just the video. Or you can say, I just want the audio. And you can drag just the audio. So using the source monitor is a good way for kind of perusing your footage instead of dragging it in here and then having to manually kind of drag the tooltip ends, which will allow to trim. But since I'm syncing with outside footage, I want the entire clip so that it can match the audio where it needs to go in the clip. But so now I've got this video footage and I've got my audio and I need to synchronize it. You can do it manually, which is why a lot of people will clap after calling a scene. Premiere has an auto function that I use a lot and works really well. If you right click on if you select all the clips and you right click and you scroll down to synchronize, and you click it, I just say audio to track 2. So this is A1 is audio track 1, A2 is audio track 2 being our primary third-party audio. So I will click that and it will sync the clips up. So now
it is a jingly book.
They match.
Should not have treated you like that.
No.
And they're perfect. I don't want this old audio that I have, even though it's still synced to our video. And so holding the option, or I'm on a Mac, so holding the option on a Windows, I think it would be Alt would be the option. Holding option allows me to kind of direct select the camera audio, and I can go ahead and delete that track because we're not going to use that anymore. So I will be direct selecting both of these and deleting them. And now the issue with these two clips is they are not linked. So if I move any of them, our audio goes out of sync, which we do not want. So if you select both of these clips, right click and link, it kind of connects the clips. You can also do Command L, will do the exact same thing. So if we go ahead and link them, we have these clips. Now you'll notice that these clips are different lengths, so we want to go ahead and trim them. We want to trim them to the point of action. Let me actually, so I will do the same here. I will go ahead and link them. And now we've got, oh wait, I did not synchronize these second ones. Let me jump back. So we'll click again, we'll synchronize. And Premiere will go ahead and link our audio. And we'll delete, and then we'll link again. All right, so now we've got our clips set up with our audio recorded, and they are all synchronized.
When we first met, it's
perfect. So now we're going to want to go ahead and, since I dragged the whole clip in, we're going to want to cut it to the usable parts of the clip. So we're going to want to cut on our action points. So here.
Action.
All right, so those are action. So if you press C, it will give you the kind of cut function. This is also over here with the razor tool. You can just kind of drag it over the clip, and since they're linked, it will cut both the video and the audio in the same place. You can delete the parts we don't need. And now we have it right there. You can do the same at the end. Right there. Go ahead and trim it. All right, and now we've got our clean cut. So here we will do the same. So Premiere had, okay, these are not linked. Let's see, and there's our action. All right, so now I've got these two clips. So since we're using sides, which in this case for this episode, we have these two people talking. So we've got our shot of Marky and we've got our shot of Sydney. And we're gonna wanna cut them together. This is the part that gets a little tricky. And so for this episode, actually, we are having issues with audio and that we are trying to record on the quad right during class change, which was not a good idea. So we have a ton of mixed audio. So for Sydney's sides, we actually just recorded her lines. We don't have any of Marky's lines, which is why these two clips are totally different lengths. So we're gonna have to be careful in our edit that we match things up. And just kind of cut together using just her lines. But recording this way, we are able to deal with most of our audio issues and still get the full coverage of the scene. But so we're gonna start by kind of backing our clips up. And so in this scene, Marky's doing most of the talking. He's kind of got his little monologue here. But so Sydney has a little scene right in the beginning.
Jason, I really wanted to say to you, I am.
So we can hear her talking there.
Hey, listen, I just wanted to...
No, Jason.
All right, so that's right where she starts. You can also, again, I'm on a really small screen, so it's a little hard to see. I use some of these kind of pull downs, which will allow me to kind of bring out the audio and I can see where the waveforms are a little bit clearer.
Listen, I just wanted to...
No, Jason.
Okay, so that's right where she starts talking. So we're gonna want this.
So sorry about what happened. Miles is a total prick, and he should not have treated you like that.
No, it's...
All right, so we've got her lines. So we'll bring over to here.
I really wanted to
say that.
No, Jason. So sorry about what happened. Miles is and he should not have treated you that way.
All right, and so in this case, I'm just going to delete that because we're not going to want to see, or actually, no, I won't. I will take this and I'm going to disable the footage in Premiere, which basically means that it is it's like turning a clip off. And this is a good way to kind of keep all of your footage on the timeline without deleting it. So in case you need it, like say I wanted to cut back to Marky's face while I'm doing this and I just kind of wanted to see his reaction, I still have the footage there. Well, if I deleted it, I would have to go back and find it again in my source monitor and bring it back. We can kind of bring her clip in and we'll have to line it up to make sure it fits.
Listen, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, Jason. No, Jason,
All right, so we're gonna want to cut kind of right on kind of as she's talking.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, Jason, I really wanted to.
Okay, so we're close.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, Jason, I really want. Jason,
Let's see, it's easiest to kind of cut between words. So if I listen to this first clip,
Jason,
she's kind of stopped halfway through. So I'm going to hear another key control. I pressed A here, which gives me this select forward tool, and this is allowing me to click in the timeline. I'm selecting all of my footage past here, and then I'm just dragging it back to kind of give me room to edit. With Premiere, it being a nonlinear editor, you really want to be careful that you're not moving clips and overlapping, because if it overlaps, it will cut into that later clip's information, and you may end up losing seconds and minutes here and there that you're not really aware of. So you just want to be sure you're not dragging and kind of overlapping anything, because you'll lose information. But going back into this edit,
Jason.
so I'm going to cut it right where she says no.
Say that.
And I'm going to bring in here.
Jason, I really wanted to tell you that I am so no, Jason.
I just wanted to say
No,
that.
Jason, I really wanted to tell you that.
And right off the bat, without doing any smoothing or anything, it's already kind of, it flows pretty well. It seems kind of a natural.
No, Jason, I really wanted to tell you that I am so sorry about what happened. Miles is a total prick, and he should not have treated you like that.
No.
All right, so now we can kind of come back. We can cut back to Marky.
No, it's not your fault. No, it's not.
And so I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's a little click there, and it's kind of the audio cutting off midway through what he's saying. And it just creates a little tiny click in the audio interface. And so to kind of take care of that, you can cut around. What I like to do is add just a really tiny fade. And actually, so for this, I already created a sequence where I cut this together. So I just did what I did, but I did it for both sides. We've got Marky's monologue, and then we have both sides. So pretty much did the exact same thing I just did, lining it up with what people are saying. Usually when you're editing, you don't want to cut right when someone starts talking. It feels a little bit unnatural. You want to kind of lead your audio in. So I'll have her like in the first clip, I think.
Treated you like that.
Listen, I just wanted to.
No, Jason.
Okay, actually no. This first clip I cut right to it. But to kind of spice it up a little bit, you can have them say their first word or first few words and then kind of cut to them. And that creates a little bit more natural kind of like leading into the audio before the cut. So it's not like you have someone talking and then it suddenly jumps and it's someone else talking. But once you kind of have your clips separated like this, you can do a little bit more to smooth the audio transitions, because sometimes they're just not, you're still jumping between two audio clips that were filmed at different times. Sometimes there's different background noise. It can really become more noticeable as you edit. So what I'll do is I'll put all my clips onto the same track. And then what I can do is get these audio same. I can jump in here and we can look at our.
Listen, I just wanted to.
No, Jason,
So that one's already pretty smooth, but to make it a little bit more smooth, I can right click right on the cut between the two clips and I can do apply default transitions. And so what this is going to do is it's going to put a crossfade, which it'll do in the video, which we do not want, but it'll also do a crossfade on the audio, which is, so I will just click on it and I'll delete the video one because we don't want that. But if we get ourselves, and you can drag the ends to make it longer or shorter, I'll just do a little short one, and that.
Listen, I just wanted to.
No, Jason,
So that creates just like a really nice, smooth little transition. So like in this case, I don't think for this cut specifically, but I know for some other cuts in this scene, we would cut from a normal dialogue and we would cut again, and it was right in fall, and you can hear the wind pushing all the leaves on the ground. And so there's like a very like noticeable, constant, like whooshing sound of leaves moving across pavement. And so that would be really noticeable if you had someone talking and all of a sudden there's all this background noise. Using this little fade can kind of trick the mind into not registering it as happening with the cut. Because ultimately, the ultimate goal of editing is for people to not notice it, which sounds kind of counterintuitive. But when editing is kind of narrative story stuff, and we're not really focusing on like interesting transitions or stuff like that, you really just want people to focus on what's being said, not with the edit. So you want it to be as smooth as possible, and using these little tiny audio fades really makes a pretty big difference.
Listen, I just wanted to.
No, Jason, I really wanted to tell you.
All right, so now with the audio, a big part of leveling everything is making sure that all of your audio levels are the same kind of volume. Premiere has a nice simple way of doing it, which is dragging this little white line, which allows you to go to plus 15 decibels and down to negative infinity. It's pretty useful. This is a good way of kind of making sure that everything is the same volume, and you can use your audio waves, your audio levels here to see.
So sorry about what happened.
So what
Miles
she's saying is except for right there, is peaking kind of between -24 and -12 decibels. And if we come over here,
Oh, hey.
Hey, listen, I just wanted to,
so Marky's a little bit quieter, so we can kind of bring it up a little bit.
listen.
Actually, it'll be better to demonstrate over here.
Is a total prick, and he should not have treated you like that.
Yeah, so this is where she is. And
When we first met, I was really awkward, and
so we can kind of bring them both up to match.
Not have treated you like that.
no, it's not your fault.
There we go.
Seriously.
And so that
I
way
was
the
actually-
audio levels are kind of more similar. And it's just nice. Everything sounds similar. People aren't turning up and down their volume. So that's one way. Dragging in the clip, that's probably the easiest way to change the audio. But again, you're limited to only going 15 decibels, increasing. I mean, you can lower it as much as you want. But if you want to increase it more, you can right click and you can go to audio gain. The audio gain will allow you can kind of adjust the gain. So say we want it to be 10 decibels louder. If you want it to be quieter, you just do negative. But if we do 10, this will actually adjust the waveforms.
hoping I'd run into you. When we first met, I was really awkward,
So now,
and I just ended this relationship, and
so doing that kind of changes the actual clip. Instead of just giving you, just kind of letting you do this little passive adjustment, this will actually change the waveform, which is useful because you can kind of see it. It's a little bit easier to see now. I can see where his clear words are. But honestly, it's really just quicker and easier to use this little level adjuster right here. But yeah, that's basic kind of video and audio coming together. I'm gonna go ahead and pause. Does anyone have any questions, or have I gone over anything too broadly? Is there anything specific that you guys? Let me reference this. We've done some of this. Okay, so let's talk about. I guess we'll kind of jump into kind of affecting these clips, and that's where the effect controls panel comes into play. So when we click on this, clicking on a clip in the timeline will give you a bunch of controls. The position of the clip, Mars, where it is in kind of your program frame, your scale, you have your rotation. You have your anchor point, which is used kind of like for rotation stuff. Like right now it's rotating around the center point. If I move the anchor point over and then bring it back, it'll be rotating around this point now, not the center. I would generally leave the anchor point alone unless you're doing some specific kind of movement stuff within the video that you need it for. Opacity will kind of change how clear, how transparent the video is. Speed ramping, that can get a little complex. I wouldn't do this unless you have slow motion footage, in which case I would look up a YouTube tutorial on how to speed ramp in Premiere, because it is super weird and very specific to the frame rate you're using and doing that. And then you have your audio controls, which you can see here. It's at -2.5 decibels, which is what we did with this line. So you can kind of see as I change that. But so yeah, if you want to crop your video in a little bit, you can kind of scale it in just a little bit, get it sized up. And this is really useful just for, if there's a boom pole in the shot, you have your microphone in the shot like this, you can just kind of zoom and crop and move your footage around rather than having to go and refilm it. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so let's talk about titles and images. So with images work very similar to video. It's pretty much the same thing. You have an image, you drag and you drop it in the timeline. It'll pretty much show up just like that. And so with Premiere, you can stack your clips, which is super useful. So for kind of starting in, say this was the beginning opening shot of our episode, we can have our logo come in, but the logo is a little bit too big. So I will go ahead and I will scale it down. Okay, just like that. And so right now it just kind of jumps in like that. But say we want to go ahead and add a default transition, which will be a little crossfade. And so our transition will fade in. And then we can have our scene fade in.
Whoa, hey.
Hey.
And then we can have our image fade out. We have just a little bit of a...
Whoa, hey.
Hey. Listen, I just wanted to...
No.
So that's images are pretty simple. Titles are a little bit more confusing because Premiere has been implementing different ways to go about it. One way is you can go file, new, legacy title, and that will open up a whole new panel. I can show you. So we'll open up a whole panel that allows you to create a title and kind of place it over your footage. I would not suggest using this because they have their own way of doing it, which is through the... Okay, yeah, here. So you just kind of grab your type tool right here on the left. If you're just going to add text to your video, you can kind of just click on your video right here. I can say new title. And it'll create, you can see it created this graphic right here in my timeline. Which is nice. So this is a good way of doing it because it automatically creates in your timeline. If you do the legacy title way, you will see here in my, let me close some of these bins so you guys can see. It'll create the title as a file in your project, and you have to drag it in, but using the type tool will just drop the file right into your timeline. And then if you want to kind of adjust it, you can go to the effect controls, and here you have graphics under text, new title. So this will allow you to kind of edit your title. You can, if you select it and you highlight it, there we go. You can change the font, you can change the width, you can kind of change the size here. You have a bunch of controls like bold, italic, full caps. You can change the color here with the fill. And then you have your same kind of transform tools as with the video and stuff. So that's kind of how you'll go ahead and create a title.
I really wanted to tell you that I am so sorry about what happened.
All right, so that is titles, images, audio, cropping, scrolling. All right. So moving into the kind of these more intermediate functions, we've already talked about syncing audio. Now we're going to talk about color correction. And color correction in Premiere is pretty simple. It's all through one panel. So if you jump into the color up here, the color workspace, you get a new layout, and you get this panel called Lumetri Color. And actually, what you'll probably see is this. This is what your panel will look like. And so this panel has all of your color controls. It has a ton of stuff. It goes from curves to color balance, vignette. It has a ton of controls. It's a super powerful kind of built-in feature in Premiere. And so these Lumetri Scopes, they're actually, I went up to Window, and you can kind of come down here and you can open up all these windows, which give you kind of a different information. Lumetri Scopes is really useful because it kind of shows you a waveform of your video. And waveforms can be confusing if you don't, I'm a DP, so I'm used to using them kind of in my cameras. I'm a photographer as well. But if you've never seen them before, a waveform will basically give you all of the color information of your image. So in this clip, it's basically, what this is telling me is that a majority of our color is kind of down here, which is me because I exposed it correctly. You can see up here, so 100 is basically saying you have fully white information in the picture. It is just a solid white pixel. There's no information there. It's basically called overexposing. You've kind of crushed the highlights, so to say. And then down here at 0 would be when you crush the shadows and you just have black pixels and you have no information there. And so I recorded this on my camera, which uses picture profiles, which is why it looks kind of washed out. It's kind of a method of recording that increases the dynamic range and allows me to capture more information rather than like using a cell phone, we should have kind of a high contrast, which is why you can see there's no shadow date. Like the shadows are pretty high. None of the image is very dark. And a lot of our stuff is here, so there's not a lot of contrast. But that's reading waveforms. So when we first jump into this, we kind of have our clip, and over here we have our basic controls, our basic correction, and all this stuff is super useful. You have exposure, so you can brighten your image, and you can see as I brighten it, all of the color in the waveform moves up to the top, and now you can see I'm overexposing a lot. And so if I drop it back down, you can see all of our information comes down. So waveforms are useful just in kind of, if you don't trust your eye, you don't trust, like my computer uses, it has kind of a auto white balance thing where it tries to match the screen to kind of the environment I'm in. So I don't always trust kind of the image I'm seeing. I don't know how it'll look, say, on someone else's phone or someone else's laptop. So I kind of use these waveforms to make sure that whoever sees it, it will look the same. But using them, so you have your exposure, which is kind of makes the image brighter or darker. You have your contrast, which kind of increases the, and you can see as I increase the contrast, the waveform expands, and we get closer to 0 and closer to 100. The highlights are adjusting just the brightest parts of the image, so I can bring them down if I'm overexposed or bring them up. The shadows kind of increase a lot of the midtones. I have whites, which are really increasing kind of the highlights, and I have the blacks, which are decreasing the shadows. So when you jump in here, you can click auto and see what Premiere does. So Premiere actually didn't do all that much. It brought up the exposure a little bit, and it brought down the black levels just a little bit. But I'm not a huge fan of that. So if I was going to do it, I would bring up the contrast, I'd bring down the highlights just a little bit, I'd bring down the shadows as well, and then I'd bring up the exposure to match. A little bit more contrast, whites just a little bit. And so already, if we go ahead and turn this off, that's not a huge difference, but it's enough to go from a pretty kind of a boring, a flat image to something that's a little bit more dynamic.
So cool.
And yeah, we can also kind of increase our saturation if we wanted to, just to make it look a little bit more natural. You can also use this white balance selector here to choose kind of what parts of your, if you click on something that is white or neutral gray, it'll basically tell Premiere what white is supposed to look like, and that will kind of adjust your image. You can make it a lot warmer or cooler, and this is just kind of playing with, if you're filming in a classroom hallway with fluorescent lights, your footage is going to look, it's going to look a lot more green because of the way fluorescent light works. If you're filming outside in daylight, your footage is going to be a little bit bluer, but not super green. And if you're filming with like a tungsten light, your footage is going to look super orange. And so you can use these sliders to kind of adjust it to account for that. Now, another thing you can use, and I will jump over here, is what's called a LUT. And a LUT is a lookup table, and here it's just called look. And if you jump into the creative tab, you can choose one. And so Premiere gives you a bunch that you can choose from. And so this is kind of how, like if you look at Hollywood movies, they kind of have an effect on them where the clip all looks the same. So if we do Gold Western, it kind of washes out, gives like an orange, kind of a dusty feel. You can work with these. They're creative. They add a lot of really cool, kind of interesting effects to your footage. But shooting with my camera, I went and I found a specific lookup table or LUT for my camera. So basically, this LUT matches the profile I was recording in. So you could look up Canon 5D Mark III LUT, although I'm not sure those cameras can actually record with a cinema profile, but it's not important. You could use this LUT, and it would kind of take the color information, because what a LUT does is it tells Premiere, it's saying if you see a pixel of this color, change it to this color. So it takes an image and takes all the colors and it adjusts them, kind of it looks up those colors on a new table, and it adjusts the images, and it basically takes some of the work away. So if I apply this LUT that matches my camera, we can see already makes a pretty big difference. It makes it look much more normal. And so this LUT did all of the work that I did on this clip, but in, you know, just a few clicks. So if you know what camera you're shooting on and you film in a profile that's different from normal, you can kind of look up a LUT, you can find a LUT, and you can use that to kind of get all sorts of effects. I have a couple different ones in here. If I go back, for example, you could use a, let's see, I can't find it, but there's popular, like orange and teal is a really popular LUT that kind of changes your footage to make the kind of green looks a lot more blue, which you can kind of mimic here using some of these, which kind of change the tint. But honestly, color grading, it's a delicate science. It takes a lot of just practice and messing around to kind of make your clips look the way you want. But so it's once you get kind of a starting place, you know, I've corrected the footage, I've got it somewhere I'm happy with. You can leave it at that. You can get more specific. You can go into curves. You can use some of these things to kind of bring some of the shadows down. I want to bring the highlights up, increase the contrast. And so using this is called an S curve, where it kind of forms the shape of an S. And that's just bringing down the shadows and pulling up the highlights and just increasing contrast in your overall image. But yeah, I did that. So I went ahead and did that on some of these clips. You can kind of see. So Marky's side was properly exposed, but if we look at the other one, we can see all here in the background, it's too bright. We kind of got the sun shining. This is overexposed. So we can kind of fix this in Premiere. You can see here, I overexposed it so badly that there isn't any information there. But if we bring the exposure down, there's a little bit more in here that we can kind of still use. But we just need to figure out kind of a way to bring it out, but while keeping so that we can kind of see your face. So we can take the highlights down. You usually don't want to go all the way, just because it just kind of flattens the image a little bit too much. We can bring that down. We can bring the whites down as well. So we're kind of retaining some of our information in this top corner, but we're losing a lot here. So we'll want to bring kind of the contrast back in. We might need to bring exposure up a little bit. And contrast up a little bit more, and we can bring up the shadows so we can see your face. And just a little bit. So looking at it kind of before and then an after, it's really just bringing contrast back in and kind of fixing the image. But here you can see if I went ahead and if I apply that LUT. Contrast down. So here I've gone ahead and kind of color corrected. I've messed with the cinema profile. Using these color correction stuff is really useful, even if you're not filming on profiles, which can get super confusing. Even if you're just recording through the camera, which usually works perfectly fine. This allows you to really just kind of fine tune areas where your camera might have gone wrong, you know. If something's a little bit too dark, you can just bring up the exposure to kind of retain some of the image. If it's too bright, you can sometimes pull it down. You know, if the white balance is off, you can kind of adjust it and bring it back. And it just allows you a next level of control in case anything goes wrong. All right. Another thing that I think would be really useful, because I know a lot of people struggle with kind of camera shake. You know, when you're trying to move your camera, it's really hard to keep it stable. Premiere has a built-in effect. I'm going to jump back to my editing tab. Has a built-in effect called the warp stabilizer.
Hey, Evan, Angelina has a question.
Oh, yes.
Hey, just on the topic of color correcting, I was wondering if you ever use adjustment layers instead of editing right on the clip, and what your opinion is on using one or the other. Yeah,
I've used adjustment layers. It's really useful. So basically what you can do is you can create an, okay, hold on. I'm going here, project. You can create an adjustment layer. And what this is kind of like an empty layer that you can put above your footage. So if I go ahead and jump back into our color, and I copy this information, let me go ahead and remove. So if you click remove attributes, you can go ahead and remove. So I'm going to remove lumetri color off of this clip, and I'm going to paste it onto the adjustment layer. And so now this adjustment layer is acting as my color correction. And this is nice because you can color grade, and color grading is really hard on computers. My computer's fan is almost at max volume right now, just trying to kind of adjust for zoom in this. Using adjustment layers means that you can turn them off. So I can color correct. I can be like, all right, perfect. Then I can turn that off, and now I can kind of play back the naked footage, so to say, without the computer having to process all of that color correction I did. So to answer your question, I've used adjustment layers in the past. With a previous version of Premiere, I had a lot of trouble with them. I had to redo, I got 3/4 of the way through a project, and then Premiere stopped recognizing my adjustment layers. And I had to go back and I had to redo all of my color grading on all of the clips by themselves. And since then, I've just done it on the clip. I usually save color grading for the very end, so I make sure that all of my edits are done. I've basically got the video how I want it, and then I do my color grading. That way it's the final process, and I don't have to do anything else other than render it out once I'm done. But if you're editing really fast, or you want to kind of show, if you're editing for like a client, or you want to show, like you want a rough draft, and you want to show people like what it's going to look like so they don't see your footage and they're like, what is this ugly footage? Why does it look like this? You can use the adjustment layers and you can turn them off to complete your editing. I've had a few issues with adjustment layers with white balance. I'm not sure if that, yeah, so you can kind of see here, oh, well, let me turn it on. Okay. So it looks like they fixed that. Again, I haven't used adjustment layers in a while. The last time I used them, you could not white balance through the adjustment layer because it was an empty layer. So if you tried to white balance, it was just confusing. It wouldn't work. But I think they're useful. I personally don't use them. Just kind of bake it into the clips because I've never had an issue with being able to kind of click the clip, go into my effect controls, and manually, let me find a clip that has this one, manually kind of, so using this kind of FX button right here in the corner will toggle the effect on or off. So if I've needed to, say, edit a clip further and I didn't want to deal with the color grading, I've just gone in and toggled that off and then turned it on later when I needed it, which basically does the same thing kind of as an adjustment layer. But adjustment layers can also be an easy way to kind of apply a LUT to a bunch of footage. So another reason to use them that would probably actually be faster is, so for this whole clip, I would suggest doing individual color grading per clip because depending on how you're recording, each scene, each shot is going to look different. But if you have a bunch of similar looking shots and you just want to do the whole thing super quick, you can make one big adjustment layer that'll cover all of your clips, do your color correction on that, and it'll apply to everything. And it's much faster than going through, copying each one, moving on to the next clip, selecting it, pasting the attributes, going on, then moving on to the next one, doing it again. So I guess it kind of depends on your project, but adjustment layers can make it much more efficient.
We also have a question from the chat that's about color correction. Can you color correct the source clip rather than correct each clip after it is in the sequence?
Not that I believe. So the source is pretty much just for like choosing what part of the clip you want. It's like showing you the clip and it allows you to kind of look over it. I can kind of look through it. I can see that we spent a bunch of time waiting for someone. I think they had like keys jangling on their hip and we didn't want to use that. There aren't really any controls you can do in here. I can't scale the footage. I can't crop it. I can't rotate it. I can't do anything. This is just showing me the footage right through the project thing. And basically all I can do is select it and then drag it in. Because the timeline is where you're going to do all of your editing. That's pretty much where all the effects and controls are going to happen. Real quick, just because I remembered I moved over this. So all these tools here on the left, they all have different functions that can kind of be used. I've been most using the kind of the direct selection tool. You know, I've just been selecting clip, dragging at the ends to kind of trim it if I need to. But there's a lot of stuff that makes it easier. For example, the ripple edit tool. So what that will do is, say I want just this clip right here to be a little bit longer. Instead of going through and pulling this one back and then extending it, what I can just do is use the ripple edit. I can go in, I can make sure that I'm grabbing the end of the clip I want. I can drag it out and it'll automatically push all of my clips back, the entire timeline. So when I talk about making sure that you're not overlapping or cutting into anything later down the timeline, using the ripple edit tool will make sure that that doesn't happen. But if you're editing to music, you want to be careful with the ripple edit tool, because if I do this, it will shift all of my clips down, and say I've edited an entire video to the beat of my music and then I move one click by half a second, every single cut for the rest of my video will be half a second off. Has happened to me before. Super frustrating. I didn't realize it for almost an hour, and then I had to go back and recut everything. So I would be careful with the ripple edit tool. There's a couple other ones. There's the rolling edit. I'm gonna be honest, I've never used this tool before. It looks like the rolling edit is just kind of dragging. It's extending one clip and then cutting into the next. I might be wrong about that. That's just kind of what it appears to be doing. And the rate stretch tool. So this tool will slow or speed up your footage. So if you don't want to mess with like kind of fast and slow motion, you can drag a clip out. And so this slowed it down. You can see this little number here, 51. So it's 51% the speed it normally is. Since this is only 30 frames per second, it's going to be super jumpy and laggy. It can also speed it up a lot with a much faster clip. So that's useful if you just want to constantly be aware that you want to make sure you have the frames to do slow motion. The human eye sees it roughly 24 frames per second, which is why I usually edit in a 24 frames per second timeline. So if I have a 30 frame per second video, I can slow it down, whatever that is, 80 something percent to 24 frames per second. Before I can visually see like lag or stuttering in the frames. If you record at like 120 frames per second, you can slow it down way more, down to just 23, and you'll be able to get like actual smooth slow motion. But you want to be careful you don't go over, you don't go under, and you don't want to slow something down too much, because it will stutter. It can just look really unnatural, especially if you have normal speed video clips around that. Let's see. Let me open this chat to make sure I'm not missing anything. No. All right. Does anyone have any other questions with color correction and grading? I know it's super complicated. I just covered a ton of information in not a lot of time. But if not, I can move on to stabilization and then kind of exporting your project. All right. So the warp stabilizer, this is a really useful tool. If you have any shake in your footage, this is a super useful tool. It's also really intense and will make your computer suffer. So you want to kind of use it liberally, I guess you could say. But in this case, I shot this scene on a gimbal, which is it's a motorized kind of piece of equipment that automatically balances my camera as I move it. So off the bat, it wasn't very, let's see if I turn it off, you can see that it's pretty smooth. There's not a lot of shake, but since this was the footage I supplied, I figured I would use it. When I turn on the warp stabilizer, so what you saw it did is it just cropped in the footage, and it's basically looking at the way the camera moves, and it's trying to stabilize the footage digitally. And so if we play it back, you can see it's a tiny bit smoother, but you will also notice, because I have it turned up to 50% smoothness, what it does here is there's a little bit of a jello effect. I'm not sure, I know that Zoom kind of lags a little bit, so I'm not sure if you guys can see it. But what Premiere is doing is it's moving the pixels in the image to try and stabilize this. And what they can sometimes create is this weird jello effect where the edges move faster than the center. and it can look really weird. So if you're using the warp stabilizer effect, which you can find by going to the effects, you can go Window, Effects, and then searching for warp stabilizer right here. You can drag an effect to a clip, or you can just double click and it will apply it. And so here it's applying it over a clip already. So what it will do when you apply it is it's going to analyze the clip. So it's looking through each frame. It's making motion points. It's kind of tracking, you know, how the subjects in the frame are moving and how the camera is moving. So it'll go through and track that, and then it will go ahead and apply its stabilization. So think of this as a really useful tool to make your footage look better, but it won't save your footage. So I know STV has those kind of shoulder rigs, which are super useful and much better than just holding the camera by yourself. You have multiple points of contact, but if you're walking, you will still kind of get the bounce of your steps. So using this can kind of, you know, can save your footage. It can make it look a lot smoother. But if you have really, really shaky footage and you apply this effect, the whole thing will just look super weird, and it'll like all make people sick to their stomach. So I would just be careful with this. It's definitely try it out on some of your footage. See if you like using it. I would say I've used it in every project I've worked on, usually at least once, just to kind of account for my own shaky hands. But yeah, that's probably one of the most useful effects. A lot of the effects are not so much. Well, let me go ahead and cancel my search. Looking at the video effects, I mean, you have a ton of stuff here. You have like blur and sharpen, so you can add a blur. So once you apply an effect, right there, I just double clicked since I have a clip selected. I just double clicked and it added it. So in my effect controls, I just scroll down until I see here I have the Gaussian blur, and I can turn that up. It'll blur my footage. So there's a ton of effects very similar to a photo editing program or anything like that. There's image keying here. This will be if you use a green screen. I do not have any green screen footage, but if people would be interested in learning how to do that, I can do another later workshop, or there's a ton of super useful videos. I highly suggest. I learned Premiere 100% completely off of YouTube. Took a while, but I just open a project. I'd be like, I know what I want to do. I would look up Adobe Premiere Pro, whatever I wanted to do, and then I would watch YouTube videos. There's a ton of super cool learning stuff. I think LinkedIn Learning, which all UNC students should have access to, has some really good Premiere Basics programs. Probably a lot more concise and on point than I am being right now, but they're super useful. You can learn from that. I would do that if you want to kind of pick up new stuff. But if people are interested in green screen, I can go more in detail at a later date once I have some green screen footage. So let's see. Last thing to talk about. All right. Oh, basic keyframing. Okay, so keyframing, let's see. So when I talked about kind of being able to move footage with these like position tools, scale, rotation, what you can also do is animate them. And it's using this little stopwatch icon here, which is kind of toggling your animation. So say we want this to kind of slowly zoom in a Marquee, and we didn't film it that way, but we want it to kind of slowly move in as he's talking. We can create a scale keyframe. So a keyframe is marking a spot, and it's basically saving like the image is on this place in the screen, it's this size. So we can create a keyframe where we want to start zooming in, and then we can create another one by clicking this add remove keyframe button right here. And then we can zoom in. And so what that will do is then animate, and it will move each frame a little bit to account for that. We have...
Not your fault. Seriously. Then I met you, and you're pretty and nice.
This is really slow. Okay. And so now we have a little bit...
Then I met you, and you're pretty and nice and funny and sweet, and it just was really confusing, and your friends are so cool, and you're that insane.
A little bit of a zoom. And so you can use this keyframe with pretty much every single option in Premiere. You can see it's available for all of our color grading stuff, rotation, speed, anchor point, scale, position, width. It's really useful for doing just kind of like little animation stuff. If you want it to zoom in a little bit and you want it to be really smooth rather than like a jump cut. Another thing with keyframes, they usually will just kind of start. And if you want to make them a little bit smoother, you can right click. You have ease in and ease out. And so these ease in and ease out is a little confusing because it's kind of the opposite of what you'd think. You might think that ease in would be for your starting point, and ease out would be for your ending point, but it's actually the opposite. Ease out will ease out into the transition. It's a little bit confusing. And then ease in will kind of ease into the ending point, if that makes sense. And you can see when I click those, it changed the animation. And so we have kind of our filled in sections of this hourglass that are marking where the animation starts and stops, and then we have the empty ones that are the end. And so what this will do,
you and you're pretty and nice and funny and sweet.
The zoom
and
in. So instead of just starting,
really confusing, and your
it kind
friends
of
are
it
so
starts
cool,
faster
and
and then it
that
slows
insane
down
house,
at the
which
end.
just made me feel.
Sorry, I was talking over him. It just kind of animates it a little bit smoother. It gives you a little bit of a curve to the animation instead of just going straight. And that's useful. Just making stuff as smooth as possible so there's no sudden jumps. Really, it would just make your editing as efficient, as good as possible. So, all right, so let's talk about exporting. So exporting in Premiere can be a little bit intense because it gives you a ton of options, and if you're not really sure what they mean or what they stand for, it can be very confusing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have my timeline. I've been editing in this timeline a while. I've got clips all spaced out. If I were to just go to File, Export Media right now, it would export all 6.5 minutes of my timeline with all of this empty space in between. Not really what we want. We want to control that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the same keyboard shortcuts as we did in the source monitor, and we can also right click and you can say mark in. And so that marking in is a starting point, and you can come here to the end. And right now I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard, up and down arrow keys, which are moving to the start and the end of clips so I can get stuff aligned. So I'll move to the end, and then I will mark out. And what this is doing is it's telling Premiere only focus on this specific part of the timeline. It's just focusing on from 9 seconds in to 1:30. And that way we can export just what we want without having to worry about any extra clips that are out on the timeline, just kind of hanging out. So once we've done that, so a big thing with Premiere is when you're accessing the menus, it's based off what panel you're in. So you see when I click these panels, we get this little blue kind of highlight around them. So when you're exporting, you want to make sure that you're on the timeline panel. Otherwise, it won't work. If we're on our project and we go File, Export Media, nothing will happen because there's nothing in this folder right now. There's nothing selected. So we go to the timeline. We have our in and our out points marked. We will go File, Export Media, and it will open up the export dialog. And so this is a ton of settings on here. I will go ahead and tell you which ones are important. This is just going to go ahead and show you kind of from start to finish your clip. So from here, you can see my in and out, my out mark points. Say I wanted to go ahead and include the full timeline, which will be all 6 minutes. I can do that, or I can cut it to where I want to be, but we did that beforehand. So up here, you have your export setting. You can do match sequence settings. Actually, don't do match sequence settings. You can see it changed it to big preview. I wouldn't do that. So what I always do is I use H.264. This is a pretty standard video codec, it's called. It's kind of the way video information is stored and saved. This will save it as a .mp4, which in my experience works the best kind of cross-platform. Works on my computer, works on my phone. It's what I export all my videos to. So I would suggest just using H.264. And then match source, high bit rate. Bit rate refers to kind of how all of the information in your, so video footage is huge. This project, these two video clips are probably I have no idea how big they are, but way bigger than this estimated file size of 101 megabytes. So what Premiere is doing is it's compressing the footage, and the bit rate basically talks about kind of how Premiere does it. I'm kind of butchering the definition of bitrate. You can kind of look it up if you're interested, but it's basically saying how Premiere is compressing your footage. And so I have it rendering at maximum depth and using the maximum render quality to make sure that Premiere is trying to get as much quality into the footage as possible, but it's going to take a little bit longer, which you will see in a sec. So H.264, I would leave some of the other stuff. If you just want to export the audio, you can uncheck video, and if you just want to export the video, you can uncheck the audio. And then down here, you have more of your settings and your video settings. You can see the size is set to my sequence, which is 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames a second. And then the audio is pretty much, it's just in a standard format. I would leave it at that. Premiere knows what it's doing. These other things, they're not super important. The output name, if you click this, it will tell you where you're saving your project. So for me, I want it to be in my projects folder. I want it to be in the workshop. I want it to be in my renders. I'm just going to rename it to, rough draft 1. So I'll save it. So now it's rough draft 1. It's going into my external drive. So Premiere is highlighting this Q button because it wants me to use Adobe's other program, Adobe Media Encoder, which is basically that app is this entire export dialog window, but in a super powerful own application that gives you a ton of controls over every little tiny bit of the video. But that's not necessary, and we don't need to do that at all for most video. I've used Adobe Render Queue when I'm exporting multiple clips. So say I'm creating like a training video and I have one Premiere project that has 5 videos. I will use the render queue and I will basically queue up each video. And when I'm ready, I can open up Adobe Media Encoder, press start, and it will render each of those videos one at a time, which is useful. But for this, I'm just going to go ahead and I've selected where to save. I'm just going to click export, and Premiere is going to go through. It's going to render audio first, and then it's going to render the video, but we're not going to wait for that. And when it does that, it will go ahead and save it right to your project in renders, where here it has a half rendered video that's a broken file, but roughdraft1.mp4. So yeah, that's exporting. I think at this point I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Do you guys have specific questions or specific things that you want to know how to do that I perhaps can elaborate on more? See anything in the chat? If not, I think I've kept you guys 10 to 11 minutes over past 8, but I think that's pretty much all of how my workflow for Premiere. I hope it wasn't too confusing, and I hope I was useful and you guys were able to kind of learn a little bit about Premiere. Ava, if you want, you can kind of share my email in the STV group chat or the chat, or I guess I can share it. If you guys have any questions, I'm the equipment manager at STV, so next year, if you have any questions with how to use anything, I will probably know the answer, and if not, I can watch a YouTube video and figure it out and then show you guys how to use it. Happy to help as best I can. There's my email if you want to send it to me or send something to me. But yeah, that's kind of Adobe Premiere Basics Student Television Edition.
Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Evan, for instructing us and teaching us new stuff.
Yeah, all right.